Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beat the Sheet, an Xbox Game Pass challenge. The only podcast aiming to complete every single one of the 510 titles that have been made available on Xbox Game Pass since the start of 2020. As always, I'm your host Andy Wood, and I'm joined by my co-host Josh.
Well, how y'all doing?
How y'all doing indeed. So, on this week's show, we're joining the So Solis Crew in Just Cause 4. Koei Tecmo comes up with an idea so stupid it might be genius. And has Psychonauts made us suddenly not give a shit about Psychonauts 2?
It kind of has. I was really looking forward to that game, and now I'm just not.
Yeah, we'll see. But anyway, how has your week been this week, Josh? What's been going on?
Oh, it's been okay. You know, a lot of Final Fantasy IX, as you would expect. Have spent a little bit of time with the sequel to one of my favorite Game Pass games, which was Super Hot. Super Hot Mind Control Delete was the name of the sequel. I was very excited to play this because I loved the first one, gave it a 9, couldn't wait to get me some more Super Hot. And yeah, it just kind of turns out Mind Control Delete kind of sucks. That game just fundamentally does not understand what made Super Hot a good game. Just completely lose it in a kind of like a roguelike structure, which doesn't help. That was not the first impression I needed. You know, that wasn't great, but just a load of random power-ups and random numbers and procedural levels. None of these beautiful tailored levels which they created in the first game. It's just a boring, monotonous mess of a video game, which is only saved by the fact that the actual Super Hot formula is so good that even a solid turd would still have some personality because it's such a good idea at its very core. But yeah, no, I'm somewhat disappointed with that one. That was a crushing blow. I went to bed quite sad when I played it. I played 2 hours of Super Hot Mind Control. I just went to bed. I was like, I'm really sad. I was looking forward to this game, and yeah, it's a 6. It's headed for a 6. It's the obligatory Game Pass 6.
It is. It's your standard 6.
But how are you doing? Have you found any obligatory Game Pass 6s to enjoy this week?
Well, I mean, of course, you know, I'm sure we'll be getting to some obligatory Game Pass 6 as we go on with the show. But yeah, no, I'm not too bad. I agree with a lot of what you're saying about Super Hot Mind Control Delete. I think, you know, it takes a really pure, basic formula for a game, and it just kind of, as you said, adds a bunch of procedural stuff to it, adds a bunch of complexities that don't really help. Like suddenly there's people where you have to shoot them only in like the right leg. You're like, that's not Super Hot. That's not what it's about. So yeah, all that stuff's kind of a bit rough. I would say that it just about manages to pull itself together in the final hour. Like there's some cool traditional Super Hot-y goodness at the end, but it doesn't make up for having to just drag yourself through about 4 or 5 hours of the same 7 roguelike maps repeatedly. It's not a fantastic showing for Super Hot, sadly. But yeah, over here, I'm not bad. Obviously, been playing all of our Game Pass stuff. I've had to get a GameCube this week because I have one at my parents' house somewhere, and I just haven't seen it in about a decade. So I've officially gave up. It ain't going to happen. And I've grabbed myself a GameCube on eBay, which is on its way next week. Need that for some secret projects that are coming up that, you know, people will hear about at some point. But yeah, my main takeaway from buying a GameCube on eBay is, good God, the prices of games on that thing have shot up in about the last 5 or 6 years. I couldn't believe it. Like I nearly built up a collection about 5 or 6 years ago, and some of the more expensive games then, your stuff like Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, they were like about £50, maybe 60. Yeah, that's 150 now. It's absolutely outrageous. There's some games on this thing for like £300 that aren't even good. There's some weird game called Gadget Cars or something, and it looks like it's total garbage, and it's like £300. It's just like, what is this? So yeah, that's going to be an expensive undertaking, but gonna have to try and, you know, keep it in check and just try and buy the odd game every now and then, maybe. But yeah, it's brutal, man.
It's a brutal market. I remember when I got a copy of Pikmin 2 for about £33 about a year or so ago, and now that thing sells for about £80.
Yeah,
just comfortably for absolutely no worries at all. If it continues at this rate, it will buy me a house in about 5 years' time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Who needs Bitcoin, man? You just get Pikmin 2 and some like old JRPGs, get a Fire Emblem game. That's your Bitcoin.
That's all you need. Somebody may literally trade me their house for a copy of Pikmin 2. The rate that GameCube games keep extrapolated. So yeah, if anybody does have property they want to exchange for Pikmin, then hit me up, man. I'm all about that trade. I'll take you up on that one.
I mean, I'll try my best to source you a copy of about the 5th most expensive GameCube game, Frogger Beyond. And then, maybe we can trade that for some really good houses or cars, because apparently that's worth money. It's an absolute crazy place. But yeah, I'm gonna have to slowly build up a collection on that one as time goes on.
Absolutely. Shall we talk about Game Pass though, rather than Game Cubes?
I guess so.
I guess so. Okay, we've had 4 new additions, technically 5, to the Xbox Game Pass service this week, and they are Final Fantasy X-X2 HD Remastered Collection, Just Cause 4 Reloaded, Psychonauts, and Red Dead Online. So, of course, the Final Fantasy games, technically it's 2 games, but they're put together for whatever reason, so it's only a single Y on the sheet, so thanks for that, I guess,
always
Microsoft.
Like
that's always cool, but what did you make of this lineup? There's some pretty good games and a giant turd of a game amongst this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this list's fine. Psychonauts, cool to see that come to Game Pass. Obviously, trying to get people hyped for Psychonauts 2. We will discuss soon how well that's gone. But then, Just Cause 4 Reloaded is a bit of a lie. Because I was hoping to steal a free Y on that one, because we've completed Just Cause 4 already. It used to be in Game Pass about a year ago. But then I pressed on the download for this to see that this is literally just Cause 4 with a bit of DLC. It's like Just Cause 4, but here's a rocket launcher. So that's just Cause 4. If you've already played it, you definitely don't need to play it again. Final Fantasy, good that they're still coming in. We've got most of the Final Fantasies now. Obviously, they are starting to leave some of the older ones, but we've had near enough every Final Fantasy game now, except for 13, the kind of 13 trilogy, which isn't particularly anyone's favorite, but I'm sure someone will be happy when it shows up. And Red Dead Online, again, kind of something that's been in Game Pass already. We had the full Red Dead Redemption 2 last year. Now we've just got kind of one little piece of Red Dead Redemption 2. I guess that's fine. Like GTA Online before it, Red Dead Online is a microtransactions like marketplace, basically. They want this kind of thing in Game Pass because they want you to give them loads of money. So I can see why it's here, but yeah, a fine week.
A fine week, some perfectly decent games, even if nothing here will set your world alight. Shall we go into our first game, though? Obviously, Final Fantasy X/10-2 is a bit of a disaster for us because we are currently playing Final Fantasy 9. So the very last thing we needed was another 80, maybe 120 hours of Final Fantasy to play through. So neither of us have touched it. I did play it yonks ago when I was a child. I played about 25 hours of 10 and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but never finished it for whatever reason. So we can't give you too many thoughts, but we do know somebody who can.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in a similar problem to you here in that, we're so busy with Final Fantasy 9. And, Final Fantasy X is very much a traditional JRPG. I jumped into 12 for a few hours when that came in because 12's a weird game. There's things you can talk about even from the first few hours, whereas 10 it's fairly standard JRPG business. So, so we went off to one of our friends of the show, Nick Robinson, and he loves Final Fantasy, absolutely loves Final Fantasy X. So we tasked him with giving us some bullet points, which we are framing as Nick thoughts. So we got some Nick thoughts here. This is Final Fantasy X and X-2. And yeah, if you like great music, a beautiful varied world, strategic battles, fun mini games, and wonderful overacting, then you'll like Final Fantasy X and X-2. That's the best we got for you. We got some Nick thoughts. He likes the game. I'm sure we'd like the game if we could possibly play it. But there is just no world in which you can play 9 and 10 in this series and X-2 at the same time. It just can't happen. So yeah, there you go. Good game. We're sure it'll be great, but it's just not something we can really hit right now.
Absolutely. It's Final Fantasy. It's good. If you like Final Fantasy, you'll probably like Final Fantasy X. That's a pretty simple statement, but it's overall true. Let's kind of park our horse at the stable and talk about our next game, Red Dead Online. Now, Red Dead Online, as you mentioned, the online component of Red Dead Redemption 2, Red Dead Redemption 2 being one of my favorite games of the last console generation, a stone cold classic, which everybody should play. Red Dead Online should just be a reminder to people who have not played RDR2 to play that game, because it is quite fantastic. But here we've just got the online component of it, which has been growing steadily since the game's launch a couple of years ago. It's kind of finally got up to speed. It's in the similar way to Grand Theft Auto Online. It took a while to get going, but now it very much has done. You've played a little bit of it. I'm not much of an online gamer, and I don't have much capability to do it anyway. So why don't you tell us what it's like to exist in a giant cowboy multiplayer party?
Yeah, so I mean, well, as well as you not having the online capabilities, this does also require you to download the entire size of Red Dead Redemption 2, which is like 100 gig. So, if you can't do that, then this isn't worth going for. But yeah, look, I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place in obviously a fantastic, incredibly detailed open world. The world's fantastic, and Red Dead Online is in that same world. So they're started off from a pretty strong point here. That's again similar to the structure of GTA Online. That takes place in the world they crafted for the narrative single player mode. So like the idea of that. And yeah, for what you get here, if you've played Red Dead Redemption 2 and you loved it and you just want to spend more time in that world, this is a decent way to do it. It's got its own story. You kind of start out as a prisoner and you go along a path of, a reasonably long set of narrative missions. I don't believe that story's finished yet. I think they're still adding to it as they go. So, if that would frustrate you, maybe not hitting an ending, then maybe give it a bit of time and see if it actually does ever have an ending, which it might well not. They might just keep building it. But, there's some story missions there. By and large, those are pretty fun. You're doing the same sort of stuff you do in the single player, like bank heists and things like that. Sadly, none of that really transfers over to anything outside of those narrative missions. So, those are single player. You're just doing more single player story content effectively. There's no cool stuff like bank heist that you're doing with other people in like a live open world area, which I think is a shame. GTA has now got its kind of bank heists online that are apparently the best thing to do in the whole game. So maybe they'll add some more stuff like that to Red Dead at some point. But yeah, again, the world's great and you're going to enjoy going around in it because of course you're going to. The only thing I would say here is that obviously this is in Game Pass and you're getting it for free. Now, a lot of the content in Red Dead Online is behind these different roles. You can take on different roles, which are almost like jobs. So you've got like bounty hunting, where, you're obviously going to go and get bounties, capture people, bring them back. You've got things like you can be a collector who is you explore the world and find rare items to bring back and sell. There's a trader where you hunt animals and you do like runs to deliver products to people and stuff like that. There's like 5 of these jobs, and to unlock these jobs, you need to have 25 gold per job, gold bars. And this is like kind of the premium currency of Red Dead Online. Now, it sounds as though they'll kind of give you enough currency to get one of those roles without you having to do too much effort, or spend any money, of course. But after that, it starts to really, really slow up. So if you do actually want to spend a good bit of time in this world and actually see all of these different jobs and experience them and do that content, it's going to be 25 of these gold bars to get each one of those, which I saw some calculations online, did a bit of research on this. And it sounds like if you insist on not buying the microtransactions, you're probably looking at doing about 20 hours of like stranger missions, like the kind of random encounter type things you see in the single player. You're looking at doing about 20 hours of those per job. You'll get about 25 gold bars by the time you sit and do that for 20 hours. And those missions are fun to see in the odd 5-minute burst, but you don't want to be just doing them for 20 hours. So I think it's just one of those things where, because this is an online thing, it might be free in Game Pass, but don't be suckered into thinking this is really going to be a free experience. If you want to get the most out of this, you're probably going to be, by the time you're done, probably going to be parting with the price of a full price release, really. I don't see a way around it.
Yeah, as with many of these sort of titles, the fact of the matter is, if you don't devote yourself to it almost like a job, then you're going to have to pay to, get the fun. And a lot of people may not particularly care. You may just be able to drop in, cause a bit of carnage, drop back out again. But if you are focused on actual progression and actually really investing in the world, then you're probably going to have to spend some bucks to make it happen. I mean, admittedly, if you're going to be spending that money, you might as well just buy a copy of Red Dead 2, because at least then you've got the solo experience as well, which is quite brilliant and would placate most people's want-on carnage needs just within that game world. So
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
a good proposition, and it's good to see it in the service. It's obviously a very well-crafted experience, but yeah, by all means, it's not essential stuff unless you really want to play online Red Dead. But
Well, that's it, yeah. And I would say as well, one thing to be very aware of is that everyone in this world is a dick. So that you go into this knowing that, because everyone who sees you, and keep in mind as well that just like in the single player, like you can have effectively auto aim on your guns. If you look vaguely in the right area and zoom in, it'll just lock onto people. So everyone online can hit great shots easily, and they will just shoot you. There's no getting around it. I've kind of like read up and watched a few videos of go more in depth into how the online experience is right now. And it sounds like basically after you've played for a few hours, you just learn that it's not worth trying to trust any of these people. You might as well just also be like them and shoot anyone you see immediately because they're about to shoot you. So, I know it's the Wild West, but it sounds like it's got a bit out of hand in the Red Dead Online world. So that's something to keep in mind too. I don't know. That for me sounds too frustrating, too stressful to really commit a lot of time to, especially when the single player content's so big anyway. Like if you want to spend 300 hours in Red Dead, you can do it in the single player mode anyway. You don't need to get shot in the head by 100 online players. So yeah.
Yeah, we're just far too old for that sort of thing
easily.
at this point. Yeah. I can't just be shooting everybody and finding it funny anymore. I'm too old, man. I just want to be left alone. I just want a new Sonic game. I don't need that. I don't need any of that. Okay, talking about dicks in a giant open world, let's talk about Rico Rodriguez in Just Cause 4, the fourth game in the Just Cause series, which is famed mostly for its traversal, but beyond that, mainly for its destruction. There's been a lot of big explosions in these games. It was always the slightly more serious Saints Row, but obviously a lot much more wacky than Grand Theft Auto. It was always the third franchise in open world carnage, and always the worst one. So we're all very thrilled to see it come back for its fourth installment, set on the glorious island of Solis, glorious in the largest inverted commas possible because it's a shithole. So, you do get to save this island. You're trying to cause an uprising to take over this island back from the military, yada, yada, yada. It's a load of trash. But what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, Just Cause 4 is, it's the Just Causiest game yet in the series. It's got all the destruction, it's got all the traversal, it's got all the bugs because Just Cause is a horrendously buggy series. I'd argue this one's at least ironed some of them out. Like you go back to Just Cause 3, there was a lot of like falling through the floor, like cars just spawning in the air and then dropping onto you, like all kinds of weird stuff. Whereas 4's at least managed to calm that down a bit. But yeah, look, the traversal is fun. It is. You can, you've got a wingsuit, you've got like a hang glider, a grappling hook. You just like attach yourself to planes and helicopters and do all kinds of crazy nonsense. They've kind of ramped it up an extra level now by you can do stuff where you can connect things to each other. So you can like, rather than bothering to shoot down a helicopter, you can just literally attach it to a building with a wire and it'll just smash into it. Like it's all pretty cool. And then it's almost like an impressive act, really, that Just Cause 4 manages to take such cool stuff and just hit you over the head with it so much that you find it boring before too long. It's like you've got all these capabilities and all these skills, and it's such a power trip. And yet, after about 3 hours, I'm kind of like, I feel like I've done everything now. Like and the map is just, it's just Ubisoft pretty much, really. Let's be honest. You just have to go across a gigantic map and take over all the outposts, and that's how you unlock the story missions to take over the island. It's you just, even if the game has a bunch of cool stuff you can do, there's only so long you can do the same missions before you just completely fed up with it. And that's pretty much my experience here. A cool template, a really fun little playground to play around in for a couple of hours, but when you actually have to sit down and try and finish it, it runs out of steam real quick.
Yeah, Just Cause 4 is relentlessly average. It at no point really gains any form of momentum. The windsuit, the grappling hook, they're kind of fun. I find the grappling hook, you try to climb up cliffs a lot in Just Cause 4 because you're always going to be slightly too short of where you want to land. And you'll be spending 5 to 10 minutes trying to get him to get the stupid hook on the top of the ledge. So often this dude just cannot get over the final bit of the ledge. It takes so much. It's his biggest weakness is overhanging ledges. More than anything else in this game, he just cannot cope with them.
I did say it's like a Ubisoft game, and that's always the main foe of like the Assassin's Creed assassins too. A little bit of an overhang and they're screwed.
Just absolutely out of it. You're right. This map, Solis, it's a huge map. It's ginormous, actually. Yeah. It's almost impressive, but it's filled with nothing. Like Ubisoft, I will rag on Ubisoft till the cows go home for how absolutely tedious their titles are, but at least they're full of something.
Yeah.
This game is full of nothing. It's just a blank, vapid, empty space. It's huge just for the purpose of being huge. All it's filled with is identikit production lines. That's all there is. There's no like quirky villages. There's no towns. There's nothing at all. It's just a giant production line. Who is trying to save this island? It sucks. You just move. There's no reason to exist here. It's that bad.
literally all that's there is, like you said, like buildings to make tanks. Like there's nothing else here. Like what's the point in living here? Just like, unless you're going to go work at the tank factory, there's literally nothing to do.
That's pretty much it. And what you do in this map is, as Andrew alluded to, you just take over outposts. That's all you do to progress the story in this game. It's the only mission design they have, is go find some grey generators. And good God, when I say grey, I mean grey. These things blend into the background like you could not believe. 20, I'd say maybe even 30% of my time in Just Cause 4 was killing everybody in the area and then spending 30 minutes trying to find the generators because they just blend into the background. There is nothing to distinguish them it just looks like background trash. And it's so ridiculously frustrating. You couldn't believe it. They're just indiscernibly hidden in these giant sodded places. It's so frustrating to do. It's so tedious to do. And you'll just do it for about 18 to 20 hours it takes to finish this game. I mean, that is just miserably boring.
Yeah, it really is. And you get the odd little kind of reprieve from that when you get a story mission, which usually at least doesn't just have you taking over a tank factory, but it doesn't vary that much. Got to be honest. It's like you might break someone out of prison instead, but it's still just a big gray building. It's like, you might go inside this gray building and go down a few floors. That's the only real difference. Everything else stays largely the same. I mean, I don't know, man. There's very little to say that I have a lot of excitement for here. I would say that they did a pretty good job with weather effects in this game. I don't particularly think they used them to the best of their abilities, but this game has it was one of the big marketing points when it was coming out. It has thunderstorms and tornadoes and blizzards, and they look cool. And, the world does kind of react to them in the areas that they happen. And that's something. The game does actually give you the ability to kind of almost summon these types of weather effects as well. But the issue with that is it basically gives you that and then doesn't give you any good opportunities to use it. It kind of just says you can do a tornado now if you want, but then it never tells you to do it for a story mission. You've already beat the outposts by the time you get it. So, it's kind of just a bit redundant, but nonetheless, the weather effects look good and they're all fun to see once. So that's something, but it also just ties into what I was already saying. This is a fun playground to spend about 1 hour in and then never think of again. It's just there's nothing here to maintain a full game.
Yeah, the weather effects are kind of cool, but they are woefully underused. They've just not thought through what you could actually do with them in terms of mission design. You do one mission where you will gain them, and there'll be a couple of set pieces, and you're thinking, oh my God, Just Cause 4 is showing some form of personality. And you think, let's carry this forward. Let's use this to continue taking over this crappy island. And then, no, you just stick it in your box. Who puts a hurricane in a box in favor of just using an assault rifle? Because that's all you need in Just Cause 4. There's loads of weapons. There's loads of alt fires on the weapons. There's like a lightning gun you can zap people with, and it's really cool, but you'll never use it because all the enemies just drop copious assault rifle. The auto aim is so generous that you don't even need to think about it. So you wouldn't use any other gun. There's no point using any other gun. It doesn't make any difference. You just go around shooting everybody in the most tedious way possible. It's mind-bogglingly trash, to be honest with you. It makes literal no sense to me. And there's also traversing the island if you're not on a windsuit, if you're not using the the grappling hook is a nightmare because the driving in this game is awful. It's absolutely terrible. A motorbike, if you dare even turn it a centimeter, he will steer off the nearest cliff like he's just realized he's playing Just Cause 4 rather than continue on his journey. The tanks, and there's so many missions where you have to get in a tank and go blow something up. But these tanks, are they made of paper or something? Because they just blow up instantly. Like vans take more to destroy than these tanks do. And the boats are terrible too. Every single vehicle in this game is appalling. The cars are just about serviceable, and that's it. But if you can't get to where you need to go via windsuit or grapple hook, you have to cope with these things. That means even getting to your next outpost sucks, which is never a particularly good outcome, where even the traversal can become an absolute nightmare. There's a lot of problems with Just Cause 4. It's fundamentally crap in ways that I haven't seen a AAA video game be in a very long time. It's close to just being dreadful. It's really bad game design.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a little bit kinder to it than you, but I still don't think it's great. I think, you know, there's some components there that could work in a better game, but it just needed somebody to design some missions for it that aren't just kill everyone and try and find this gray generator, because you aren't lying, that is genuinely about 3/4 of the entire game is just that one type of mission. So, you know, it just needed more built around it. You know, we kind of, we rag on Ubisoft all the time, particularly you, but you can really see the difference in the kind of size of these teams when you look at like a Ubisoft open world game compared to this, because, you know, as you said, their worlds, they might be too big, they might be full of quite similar content, but they have so many people working on their games that everywhere does have life to it, and all of the kind of systems and the controls all do work to a fundamentally decent level. Whereas Just Cause 4 feels like it wanted to be the size of that game, but with what I would imagine is an absolute fraction of the staff. And it really does show, because there's nothing underneath the surface at all. So yeah, I mean, look, I came out of Just Cause 4 giving it a 5 out of 10. I think the only real way to come out of this game enjoying it is if you know someone who's already completed it and they've unlocked all the fun stuff, and you literally just sit there and play it for half an hour while they go and like eat some food. You know, like there's no other way to do it. You don't want to play it from the start because you don't get anything fun for a while. You just want to dive into someone else's game, fire a tornado, do a bit of grappling stuff, and then go, I never need to play this again. That's the only real way I would say you could have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, Just Cause 4, I gave it a 4 out of 10. I think the main thing I could say about Just Cause 4 is that it made me wish I was playing an Ubisoft game. And that is a sentence I don't say lightly. The fact that my thoughts while playing it was, God, I wish I was playing Far Cry right now, is just a terrifying realization. Quick mention as well, because the story in this is dreadful all the way through. It's absolutely appalling. But the ending of it, if you can manage to slog your way through 18 hours of Just Cause 4, it may have the most anticlimactic ending I've seen in a piece of entertainment in a long, long time. It's absolutely hilarious. And to the point where I couldn't even believe it happened. Just appallingly bad closure on this story. But that's Just Cause 4. It's just a bad game, man. I wouldn't recommend this one. Okay, let's move on to our final game of the week, and it's a old Xbox classic. It's Tim Schafer and Double Fine's Psychonauts. Now, this came back way back when. I think this came back in 2005. So let's find out if I'm right. I am right. There we go. 16 years on now since this game came out. Yeah. We know Psychonauts 2 is coming probably this summer. It looks like it's on track to make that date. And people loved this game. This was the definition of a cult classic. It's one which I didn't play for whatever reason, despite the fact it sounds right up my alley being a 3D platformer. Yeah. But first time at it this time, first time for you as well. What did you make to it? Does it still kind of hold up 16 years later?
I mean, I was really excited for playing Psychonauts because, you know, we've spoke recently. We've had the remake of Destroy All Humans covered on the show, and I kind of said, you know, these kind of 10, 15-year-old weird little platformer games, they're kind of what I want. You know, it's there might not be many other people who do, but like I get quite excited when I see those kind of games come to Game Pass. And yeah, this one's had so much hype behind it for years. I've been hearing people desperate for that sequel because they absolutely adore this game. So a lot of hype going into it. And yeah, you know, I started it up. I like the idea, I would say, for starters. I think, you know, this is basically a game where it's a adventure platformer, I would say, and most of the levels take place in people's minds. So you put a door on them, you jump in the door, and you're kind of in their psyche, and you're in like these weird worlds that are obviously to do with whatever they've got going on. It's got some fun, nice touches. Like every level has bags with keys to them, and they're technically emotional baggage, and you have to try and unlock the emotional baggage to kind of get some points and level up and stuff. Nice touch. The worlds are pretty cool since they are inside people's heads. But that's kind of where the positives kind of start to run out for me with Psychonauts. I don't know, man. I find this game just very, very average. I think the actual platforming is clumsy. It has a lot of sections where you feel like you've done the right jump, but the game decides you should have been like, you'd be like swinging on a bar or something, and the game decides you should have been 1 millimeter to the left, and like you just miss the jump and fall to your death. There's a lot of that in here. Some of the later levels have, for me, fundamental design issues. Like you get lost in them, but not in a enjoyable way. It's just, you kind of just end up walking in every direction until you figure out the kind of obscure clue that they wanted you to find. That ramps up as you go along more and more. And yeah, I don't know, man. This came out. This wasn't what I expected it to be. I thought this was going to be a quite slick platformer, given its age. Obviously, you gotta give it some slack for its age. But I mean, I felt like Destroy All Humans was a tighter experience than this, and I did not expect that. So yeah, I definitely a bit disappointed overall. It has to be said.
Yeah, I've not played quite as much as you. I think I got about halfway through this game, but I kind of have similar thoughts on it. I love the setup. I love the idea. I think it's quite funny in parts. It's definitely got a good cast of characters, if nothing else. Very well voice acted. The cutscenes hilariously look worse than the actual game does now, which I love. I personally think that's fantastic. And there's a lot to like there. As you mentioned, there's a lot of humor in the way that they use these worlds which you jump into. The emotional baggage is a fantastic example. That's a very good joke. And it's just filled with little bits like that. They've clearly thought about the setting. They've very much thought about ways to make a game in this world. And it's very well done in that sense. But yeah, you're right. The platforming, it's fine. It's not bad. It's not dreadful. I've played worse platformers than Psychonauts. Absolutely. I've played far worse 3D platformers than this. It controls well enough, but it doesn't quite... It feels a bit floaty. It feels a bit loose. There's just not quite the control over the character I wanted. The actual attacks feel a bit light, a bit slight. I don't really... It's just doesn't click for me for whatever reason. It's just not quite... It's never at any point making me think, oh, wow, this is very, very cool. There's occasional moments, there's occasional set pieces in the levels, which I think, oh, that was a good idea. And then the next time I'm grinding on a rail like I'm Sonic, and I'm like, well, that's Sonic's job, dude. Stay away from Sonic's rails. That's all he's got these days. And it's just, it feels like a hodgepodge of other platformers rather than its own distinctive entity, which is the last thing I expected. I expected this to be very much itself. That's what it got me excited about. I thought this was going to be a very different type of platformer, but it isn't really. It's just a Matt Scott 3D platform, which happens to have some very good writing alongside it. That is enough for me, and it's enough for most people, but I've been dampened by the fact people were saying this was a classic, and I was expecting this to be something that would blow my mind, but it kind of doesn't. I think it's fine. I think it's playable and enjoyable, and that's about it. So yeah, a bit of a disappointment.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, as we said, this came out in 2005, which fair enough. That's 16 years old. You're not gonna jump into a 16-year-old game and think it controls as precise and perfectly as maybe the best platformers of today. But even so, there is a wealth of older platformers that feel significantly nicer to play than Psychonauts. I mean, you've got like the Ratchet and Clank series started in 2002. That's 3 years before this. Like those early Ratchet and Clank games feel miles better to control than Psychonauts. You've got Mario 64, obviously, Mario Sunshine. The Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, frankly, control nicer than this. It's Sonic Heroes was out by then, which not everyone loves, but the platforming was better than this. I don't know, it's just there's a wealth of choice of games that just kind of put the platforming in Psychonauts to shame. And I know this was, it's a Double Fine release. Double Fine were a very small team back then, I believe. They're still, they're getting a little bit bigger now that they've been acquired by Microsoft, but they've always been largely an independent team. So I know this is a game that doesn't have the Naughty Dog or the Nintendo or the Sega budget behind it at that point. But even so, as you said, outside of some good writing and some genuinely really clever and funny level setups, I would say, there's a good kind of these levels where you're jumping into the mines. There's a couple in the back half of the game that are really clever. They did get a chuckle out of me, and I'd appreciate it for that. But then all of the actual playing of the game, I just didn't particularly enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the platforming. I definitely didn't enjoy the combat. So it's tough, man. It's dragged over the line by its good writing and its good kind of set design on the levels. But it's let down on every gameplay standpoint I can really think of.
And I wonder if this is just a Double Fine kind of thing, because I've played a few of their titles now, and almost every single one I come out with the exact same criticism of love the writing, love the world, love the story, everything about the actual build of the game and its feel is good. But the actual gameplay, in a game like Brutal Legend, for example, that has such a great idea, great writing, great voice acting, great music, great world design. But the gameplay itself, I got very little out of. I didn't like it that much. I thought it was fine. And Psychonauts, again, we're in a similar situation where, these games are full to the brim with personality, but the game design itself feels like it's just the first 3D platformer they made, which I imagine it probably was. Yeah. They were more known for their adventure games. So is it surprising it's a little bit loose and a little bit lacking in tightness? Probably not, but, the reputation it's got did make me think from a gameplay standpoint, we'd be looking at more here when actually and the gameplay is actually pretty basic. It's pretty standard stuff. So yeah, I just feel we're in a weird position with this game, and I'm still excited for Psychonauts 2 because I think with a bigger budget and all this time to come up with some new ideas, the world will be fantastic. It should control tighter. So I expect it to be a better game, but yeah, I came out of this slightly cold, and that's somewhat disappointing because this was what I was looking forward to.
Well, that's it. I mean, I said at the top of this, but I love 3D platformers. I don't care how old they are. I'll play modern ones. I'll play the origins of the 3D platformers, and I'll enjoy them all, to the max I can. And this one, really, I can't think of many examples of a 3D platformer that's fell flat this much to me in recent memory. And again, obviously, as you said, a lot of that will be down to the fact that this has just had a ridiculous level of hype behind it for so many years. I genuinely thought I was going to come into this being like annoyed at myself for not experiencing it before, and that's absolutely not been the case. So definitely disappointed, but I do agree. I think with like current graphics, like up-to-date graphics and a bit more budget behind them, I am really excited just from a visual and an art design standpoint to see the sort of, to see inside the heads of the characters in Psychonauts 2. I think some of those worlds are going to be insane and just magical and brilliant to look at. And I do think they'll have some fun, kind of crazy little spins on how you get through those levels. There'll be some stuff that really subvert your expectations in Psychonauts 2 as well. But, I even though it's been 16 years, I assume the platforming is going to be behind the curve. It won't be, it'll be better than this, of course, but I'm not going into it expecting it to control like a dream. I'm kind of like lowering my expectations a bit now, which maybe that's healthy. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I can just go into it and enjoy it for what it is now, which is a kind of, I struggle to even say double A. It's in that region. It's definitely not triple A, but it's a lower budget experience. And Psychonauts 2 might be good, but this one I just don't think people necessarily need to play it unless you're really curious about the kind of origins of this series.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. We've been quite down on this game, and I don't want to be too down on it because there is a lot to like about it. I think the main thing, if you listen to this, to take away from it is to temper your expectations.
Yeah.
Don't go into this expecting something which is groundbreaking and revolutionary. There's certainly very cool moments in it, and there's a lot which is very good and very interesting. But on a gameplay standpoint, there's not huge amounts to get hyped for here. So, if you want to play Psychonauts, and I recommend people give it a look. I don't think I'm not saying don't play this game. I certainly think people, if they're interested in 3D platformers, should give it a go. But just go in with a couple of notches down on the hype pull would be what I'd recommend. And you'd probably actually enjoy this a lot more than we have. We've come in with far too great expectations, and perhaps the game has suffered in our eyes because of that.
Well, that's it exactly. Let's be honest, it's still getting the obligatory Game Pass 6 because that's what it is. It's a solid 6. It's it's just, yeah, it's got enough qualities about it that are worth seeing, that I think, it's worth checking out. Even if you get to the point where you get a bit bored of the gameplay, you could even just have a flick through kind of. It's worth seeing like some of the cutscenes or just watching a few videos of the later worlds, because they do some clever stuff. They really do. It's just that the gameplay is not going to excite you in any way, frankly. So one to take a look at, but just, yeah, definitely keep those expectations grounded.
Okay, let's have a look at the one game we know is coming soon to Game Pass in the next couple of weeks. We had it announced that Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance, that's a god-awful title, is coming to Game Pass on June 22nd, day one. Now, I hadn't even read about this, Andrew. You snuck this under my nose because I have no clue what this is. So why don't you tell me what it is and how little I'm going to want to play it?
Yeah, you ain't going to want to play this one, Josh. So, it's a tricky one, this, because it's using the Dark Alliance name, which is, there was some Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games back on the GameCube Xbox generation, and they were more typical kind of Baldur's Gate dungeon crawler type stuff, think, I don't know, Torchlight is the one that springs to mind, that sort of stuff. And those games are really cool. One of them actually just got a re-release, but apparently it's just a straight re-release. They haven't even done anything with the graphics, so maybe don't get that one. Now, this is a Dark Alliance game, but it's basically not that. It's more of a kind of third-person action game, but I think, and I may well be wrong, but I think this is one of your team up with 3 or 4 friends online and run through somewhat generic missions kind of game. It's not a cohesive story. It's kind of just a straight up, I don't want to say Left 4 Dead, but you know what I'm getting at. I think it's just one of those kind of games, you're just going to all pick a different class and you're all going to just go through and just pound some goblin people. And yeah, just do that till you're a bit fed up with it. It looks fine. And it's day one Game Pass. Day one Game Pass, again, always a good thing. So yeah, keep an eye on it. It looks pretty nice, like graphically. It might be quite impressive. I don't know for sure if it's getting a series patch, but if it does, it might look particularly good on those consoles. But yeah, it's going to be fine. It has the makings of the kind of game that is going to be getting the old 6, to be honest.
The old obligatory Game Pass 6. Yeah, it sounds like a dungeon crawler. They have a mileage. Let's say they don't go too far for me, but I'm sure it'll be perfectly cromulent for those who want to play it. Okay, let's move on to our leaving soon titles, and we're in a somewhat of a pickle this week because the next batch of leaving soon titles for roughly the 30th of May, we don't know them yet, at least at time of recording. Yep. By the time this is uploaded, we may well do. But at this very moment, we don't, so we can't help you there. And the game we're going to be talking about this week, Final Fantasy IX, has now left Game Pass, so you can't play this. So if you do want to skip what is an entirely redundant section of the show, you are more than welcome to. But we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about Final Fantasy IX, which left alongside Alan Wake and Dungeon of the Endless on Saturday, because we've put 20 odd hours into it. I haven't managed to finish it, but I've played enough of it, damn it, so I'm going to sodding well talk about it.
Yep.
So, Final Fantasy IX, 9th installment in the long-running, very famous Final Fantasy franchise, the 3rd one on the PlayStation, the last one released on the PlayStation. Where do you begin talking about a game like this? This was a big boy game when it came out. It came out on 4 discs. I remember that much because I was amazed you could have that many discs in a PlayStation box. So let's talk about this giant title.
Yeah. Okay. So as you said, this is the final Final Fantasy game to come to the PlayStation 1. After this, it was obviously Final Fantasy X, which we very briefly talked about earlier on. So this is the end of the PS1 run, and you can kind of tell in a lot of ways. We have a bit of an interesting angle here because we finished Final Fantasy VII finally after all these years quite recently, and we talked about it on an episode just a few weeks ago. And yeah, this, you can see a lot of the groundwork from Final Fantasy VII in Final Fantasy IX. It's kind of where FF7 clearly just rewrote the kind of rule book of how to make an RPG because it was their first 3D Final Fantasy game. You can see 9, they're very much, they've got the tools there, they've got the systems there. They're kind of just tweaking away at it and putting out, more games, more stories in the Final Fantasy world. And that's not necessarily a problem. That's fine. You've still got a Final Fantasy here. This is, it's a big, grand storyline. tons of travel across all these different continents. You know, it's a JRPG, so you will of course spend some time walking through areas first, and then you'll get a boat, and then you'll get a plane. That's just how all Japanese RPGs work. You got all that in here, and yeah, you know, it's for that, it's cool. You've got I quite like the kind of hook of this game as opposed to 7, because 7 is very 7's quite serious, right? I mean, it's obviously got a lot of wacky, stupid stuff going on, but the storyline's pretty heavy. You know, 7 opens up with effectively environmental terrorists, as they're called, trying to stop this giant corporation from just destroying everything. Whereas Final Fantasy 9 opens up with a gang of thieves pretending to be a theater troupe to kidnap a princess. You know, it's a very different tonal kind of direction to go in than Final Fantasy 7, and I quite appreciated that. You know, I didn't necessarily want to hit another Final Fantasy 7 Final Fantasy game right now, because we've just done one. So I at least like that this was very much striking a different tone right from the off. You know, this is a bit more comical. It's a bit more goofy. The world is very much more, you know, traditional fantasy rather than kind of, you know, futuristic style fantasy that Final Fantasy 7 had. So yeah, you know, lots of positives, lots of cool stuff about it. Just definitely more incremental though than 7.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to say that. I mean, Final Fantasy 9 came after 7 and 8, which were much more industrial kind of Final Fantasy games. They're more, you know, built up giant utopias rather than the old fantasy kingdoms of old. So Final Fantasy 9 was very much a return to what the franchise was the SNES and the NES days, and very much focused on that. By all accounts, it has a lot of references and a lot of throwbacks to the past 8 games as well. It was almost like a celebration of Final Fantasy, was how it was pitched as. And you certainly pick up on a lot of that. There is a lot of references and jokes to Final Fantasy characters and themes which have ran in different games, which even if you haven't played them all like we have not, you still kind of pick up on them because they're so famous and some of these characters are so well known and the designs are so iconic that you can't help but pick up on them. But you're right, this does have a lighter tone. It does have a lighter touch. I mean, it begins with you chasing somebody through a castle and you're all coming out of different doors and nobody can see each other. And it's ludicrously silly and over the top, and it's a lot of fun. Of course, it does get a lot more serious. It's a Final Fantasy game. They all get serious eventually. It's a giant war is going to break out between the entire gosh darn world. So that's pretty serious stuff. But you know, it's nowhere near as heavy as Final Fantasy VII was. That is a fact. It's a lot lighter touch. Perhaps because the actual cast of characters are a lot more lighter as well. Zidane, you play Zidane Tribal. He is the lead protagonist. And he's a much more jolly soul than Cloud ever was. Cloud, the miserable bastard that he is. We all love him, but he's bloody miserable. Zidane's a happy-go-lucky guy who just wants to get laid. He so badly wants to get laid. It's his
entire goal for the whole game. That's all he wants.
You know, credit to the dude. He clearly wants it and he knows what he wants. And it's a funny character for that. But there's other people as well. You got Steiner, the big knight, who's trying to protect the princess, and is just a big, goofy moron who just cannot see the obvious flashing lights in front of his face. But partly because he has loyalty and he has integrity and he has belief in what he does. And he's a cool character. He's a good soul at heart. Obviously, Dagger is the princess who's just tried to stop her own mother from destroying the sodding world. There's a lot of cool characters here. And Vivi, who is by far the best one, and I completely ignored him. The black mage, who's absolutely adorable, has a habit of falling over all the time, and has, I think, possibly the best character design of any Final Fantasy character. I love Vivi. He's so cool to look at. I absolutely adore him. He'll be in my party if I'm allowed to have him in until the end of time. He's that cool to have around. Of course, it's a Final Fantasy game. You're going to meet all sorts of new people as well, all of whom are pretty cool characters. These games are so good at this. The stories are so sweeping. The characters are so well written. It's amazing that something this old, and it came out in 2000, so it's 21 years old, has better storytelling and better characters than a lot of games do now. I mean, you compare this to Just Cause 4, and it's almost like Just Cause written by a child. Like, it's ridiculous in comparison. And that's the joy of this franchise.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, one thing that Final Fantasy IX does, which is incredibly ambitious for its time as well, is that it's not afraid to scatter its like leading characters kind of across the continent and just make you jump between them. You might spend some time with Zidane and with a couple of party members. You're solving one problem over in the one part of the world, and then for the next 5 hours you're back with Steiner and the princess, and they've gone on their own little mission somewhere else. So then you're dealing with them. You've got their abilities, their skills to kind of contend with in battle. And, they just, as the game goes on, the characters just kind of separate and then come back together, and it just keeps happening. And, that's a pretty ambitious thing to try and achieve. It's like Final Fantasy VII didn't necessarily do that, but Final Fantasy VII was very bold about separating you from some of your team members at some points. They'd make you try and use other characters because of like big story reasons, which obviously we won't go into. But yeah, this game just kind of takes it that next logical step and just straight up goes, right, these two are doing a mission over here, these three have gone over there. Figure it out, get it, just work out how to play the game and how to function as in like combat with that group. And also it just lets them kind of let all the characters breathe a bit and actually do their own things. It's really cool. And yeah, especially for something that's 21 years old.
Yeah, it's quite sweep, and it's almost like a Lord of the Rings-esque kind of tale, isn't it? Where not everybody is bundled together heading to Mordor. People are doing different things at different stages. It even builds into this mechanic it adds in this game called the active time events, where you'll just enter a room and a little notification will pop up saying you can see what one of your other characters is doing at this very moment. And it's almost always completely superfluous. It almost never matters. They're very goofy, they're very silly little scenes. It's almost stuff like they wanted to cut, but then nobody had the heart to do it, so they just lobbed them in this almost optional way. But I love that. I like the fact it's all just building in these layers of these characters. You're just spending as much time as humanly possible with them, even when you're not necessarily doing anything with them. And I just think that's very cool. It's a very clever idea. It's very well done. And it does make it feel like a massive, huge world, bigger than any Just Cause 4 island, because you're actually spread across and you feel like you're achieving things from different angles and coming at it from different ways. And yeah, it's very impressive. I mean, it's, as you say, it's a logical extension of Final Fantasy VII. And that kind of goes into the battle system as well, which is very, very iterative of what we saw in FF7. It's still very much about the ATB gauge, attacking once your bar is filled, and, trying to think about who's going to attack where, so you may choose to heal somebody before they get hit or something like that. It's all quite strategic. It's very clever in how it works. The one thing I don't like about it compared to FF7 is 7 had the limit gauge that you would build up as you did more and more attacks, and you could choose when to use your limit attack. FF9 has what it calls its trance system, where if you keep taking damage, your trance meter builds up, and when it gets to the top, you turn into some absolute giant freak for 2 or 3 turns, and you can do double damage. But you don't have any control of when you use that power. So often you'll just waste your trance meter on a random battle in the middle of nowhere when you don't need it. And that's very frustrating. It's perhaps not best implemented. I'd have rather had the choice to use it rather than have it just foisted upon me, no matter what the situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think as well, the battle system here is, it obviously comes from the Final Fantasy VII system. As you said, you've got the ATB gauge that fills up and you can see whose turn's going to come up next and when. That's all there. A lot of the attacks work in quite similar ways. But then it just doesn't, well, first of all, it doesn't do a lot to really go beyond what 7 did. And I also think that its system behind getting new abilities and skills is just a little bit muddled, and it felt like they just added it for the sake of it. So what you actually do in this game is all of the armor and weapons you equip, they have skills on them that you can use when you equip that item. But if you keep it on for long enough, you earn these ability points. And when you've maxed out that meter, then you get to keep that ability even when you don't wear that item of clothing or that weapon. And I get it. It's a system that lets you, pick and choose which skills you want to commit to. And, you have to keep a certain item for a long time to build up that meter. But I don't know. It feels laborious for the sake of being laborious. Like I'm sat wearing like worse armor and weapons than I have because I need to do like 50 more random encounters so I can finally learn this skill permanently instead of keeping the item on. And I don't know. It feels like an experiment that maybe didn't pan out. They were trying different stuff, trying to figure out an interesting way to implant the characters with skills. But you look at that against Final Fantasy VII, which gives you just complete flexibility to basically attach these gems to their equipment that lets them do pretty much anything. And 7 even goes into depth of like you can put a fire spell near a thing that says all, and then your fire attack will hit all the enemies instead of one. It's got all this depth to it, and 9 just doesn't really have that. You just put a shirt on that teaches you an attack, and you keep it on for a long time. And there's also just arbitrary limits on what different characters can do. Like you have characters that can mainly do magic stuff. They'll get the magic stuff off the clothes, but they won't be able to learn the other skills off it. And it all makes sense technically, but I don't know. I almost would have rather this game just went for a straight up job system, because it clearly has one underneath. There's clearly locked in warriors and magicians and stuff. I'd rather if they just had, you're a black mage. Here's a brief tree of black mage skills you can learn, and just go through that instead, rather than being tied to having to go through all my characters and make sure they're all wearing clothing where they're going to learn a new skill soon. It's a bit of a misstep for me. I found it more tedious than enjoyable.
Yeah, I wasn't massively sold on the ability system either. I see where it's going from, and I like the fact that you can, once you have built them up, you can attach them and unattach them. You have so many points you can use to customize your build to essentially what boss fight you're going to do, what kind of area you're in at the moment. And that's clever, that works well, but the actual act of grinding them up to be used is slightly tedious, and it's not particularly well explained. There's also the horrible habit of not actually telling you what any of these things do.
Yeah.
It just said man-eater, and I'm like, well, I'm assuming that means I'm going to attack men harder. But you don't really know. You're kind of just assuming that's what's going to happen. And that's actually a problem in the menus in this game a lot. This game gives you items, and it'll just have some weird fantasy name, and it won't tell you what it actually does. You can kind of figure it out because you've played enough of these games to know. But I'm just like pressing, there'll be a status, an ailment on one of my characters, and I don't know what thing to use to get rid of the status. Because I don't know what it is. It's just not told. It's not told me that. You kind of have to learn it by trial and error. And that's fine. That's kind of old-fashioned RPG stuff. It's a throwback from those days. But Final Fantasy VII told me what everything was.
That's it. Yeah.
Why this doesn't.
I mean, I got to a point with this game where, like, obviously, Zidane ended up being my highest damage character. His basic attacks were doing some serious numbers. And I'd got about 4 or 5 attacking skills that he could use. And I've just ended up ignoring them because, like, the game doesn't tell me what they do. I pressed on one and it was like targeting all of my party. And I didn't know what that effect that was going to have. So I'm not going to risk using that in a battle. And there's nowhere that explains to me what it's going to do. And I've got other attacks where I used them and I don't think anything happened, but maybe something did. And I just thought, screw it. I'll just, I'll use the magic attacks like fire and ice because I know what they are. And Zidane's just going to punch people in the face because you have not bothered to tell me any of this stuff. As you said, it's very retro, but if 7 had moved past this, then 9 shouldn't be reverting back to the old ways.
I do wonder if, and maybe people who played this game back in the day could tell us, I wonder if I was to open up the big manual that would have come with this game, whether every single thing would have been explained away in that. I would not be surprised if that was the case. But on a modern console where you don't have those things to hand, you do spend a lot of time just quickly going onto game facts going, what the hell does this do? I have no idea. And it's a little bit odd for that. It doesn't detract from anything because on the whole, unless you're a hardcore FF player, the chances are you're just going to be pressing smash and smashing people anyway. It's only for the people who want to complete it on the lowest level possible. And all those sort of things that people do to make these games artificially harder for themselves. And credit to those who do it. It's a cool thing, but not for me. So you can get by. You don't need to know. But it is a bizarre misstep. I didn't quite understand what was going on. But it doesn't detract from anything. The battle system is still fun, fighting all these enemies, the good, fantastic creature design as you would expect.
Yeah.
Boss fights are really cool as ever, some which have very strange attacks that you may die one time, but you'll jump back in, you'll be more prepared for it on this occasion, you'll know how to counteract it better. There's a lot of that going on, and of course, the musical score by Nobuo Uematsu, as ever, is absolutely fantastic. Love the battle theme on this game.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It has this almost like footing, like, and every single time it gets me hyped as fuck that I'm gonna fight something. I'm just absolutely ready to hit something with a sword. So wonderful score as ever, and kudos as well to the cutscenes. These spins look gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like, they look fantastic. They look
crazy.
better than Psychonauts do. And that came out 5 years later. I have no idea how they look this good. They look brilliant.
Yeah, no, they genuinely do. Like, it seems ridiculous that a game coming out in 2000, like, where I could say I could genuinely watch a film of the cutscenes, but I totally could. Like, these things are, like, the production values for these at the time must have been obscene. Like, the money that they must have spent to get to this level of quality, because, yeah, they are, they're really, really fantastic stuff. So, yeah, big fan of that.
Big fan. I mean, there's just a lot to like here. It's a
Yeah,
Final Fantasy
definitely.
game. I mean, we're slightly more negative on certain elements of it, perhaps than 15 or 7. I don't necessarily think it's a worse game. I actually think it's just as good. It just does different things better. A
Yeah.
lot of these games tend to do slightly different things better. And this is just another example of that. I have a lot of time for Final Fantasy 9. I've not quite finished it. I can't wait to dive in and see how it ends. A lot of these games really hit their stride in the last kind of like disc. So
Yeah.
my thoughts on this may get even better still if you was to ask me in a week or so's time when the story has really crescendoed. But at the moment, I'm still having a damn good time with it. I'm really enjoying it. Looks fantastic. The HD upgrade for this on the Nintendo Switch and of course the Xbox as well looks real good.
Mm.
Kind of feels kind of like a normal indie game for today. You know, you wouldn't indie games don't look as good as this sometimes. So yeah, it's pretty good on that front too. There's just a lot to like it.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think, as you said, this is pretty much like, it's going blow for blow with FF7 in a lot of ways. As I said, I think the battle system could have innovated slightly more. I don't love that equipment ability system that's going on. But other than that, it's just more good old Final Fantasy stuff. It remains to be seen, because I'm just about to start the final disc now. So I'll be also wrapping it up next week. And I'm interested to see how they managed to wrap up the story, because I think one of the big sticking points of Final Fantasy VII, and the reason it's revered really, is because that story just goes to some crazy places, and it stays with you. You finish FF7 and you're like, Christ, that was a game. And I'm interested to see if 9 manages to quite hit those heights. I don't feel like it's going to, but that's a high bar to hit. So yeah, I gave Final Fantasy 7 an 8, and I was close to a 9. I think this game I'm probably going to be an 8 as well, but maybe not close to a 9. It's definitely a little bit lower, but it's a great game. It deserves a good score.
It's a really good game. I'm leaning towards an 8 as well, but if that landing sticks and it gets to the place that I hope it can do, that could easily be bumped up to a 9. These games are real good. Like, we've played a few of them now, and this may be the most unexciting statement to make in 21st century gaming, but Final Fantasy is a good franchise. We never really played any of them, and it turns out it's a really good game service. So there you go. That's the hot scoops you come to this show for. Yeah. Final Fantasy is good.
There you go. That's the reward you get for sticking with this this review of something that's already left Game Pass. You get these hot takes at the end, so you're welcome. All right, then. So, time to close out the show as always with a bit of news, and we have quite a lot going on this week, Josh. There's all kinds of stupid stuff coming from quite a few different companies. So, let's start off with Josh's favorite, Ubisoft, and they've had a financial earnings call this week where they've been talking about their strategy going forward. And it sounds like they're going to be reducing focus on their AAA titles with an aim towards going for a bit more free to play and mobile content. So. Yeah. I mean, I imagine that you're probably pretty happy, Josh, to see that there might be less of the Ubisoft identikit games coming out every year. It might give them a chance to feel a bit fresher. But I don't know, man. I understand the decision. Free to play games are making money, mobile games are making money, but I ain't going to be playing them. So that's pretty much that.
I don't really know what they're going to drop the focus on. They don't have that many franchises. Like, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Watch Dogs. I don't think there'll be another Watch Dogs game anyway, because I don't think that franchise is selling as high as they think it would. So that's going to go. And the Tom Clancy stuff has been earing towards free-to-play more and more with each installment. So that making the final jump would not be particularly surprising either. So what are they turning into free-to-play games? What else do they have? Like, Ubisoft hasn't made a new Prince of Persia game in ages, and they tried to make one and they fucked it, which is why it's not out yet. They haven't made a new Splinter Cell game. They're not using any of the other franchises. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is vaporware. So what is there to cut back on? It's already cut back to the bone.
I mean, in fairness, Josh, in fairness, this says they're reducing focus on AAA games, and I think you could argue that Prince of Persia remake was closer to an indie game than a AAA game when you looked at it. So they're probably still doing that one. But no, you are right. I mean, obviously they're Ghost Recon games that are just no longer anything to do with Ghost Recon. They're just big open worlds, game as a service type deals. So I could see that going full on free to play. Rainbow Six Siege at this point pretty much makes its money by selling you extra characters. Yeah, you are right. It's there. They're already clearly on this path. You could argue they've reduced focus on AAA titles anyway by making them all identical. That's probably reduced the focus quite a bit. Just put someone in a map, put some outposts on it, and call it a day. This one has an assassin with a sword. This one has a guy with a gun. All the same game. So that must be quite easy to produce. Yeah, I don't know. It's a sensible decision. I would say, to be honest, I would be on board with Ubisoft just slowing down the rate that those games come out. Because I don't even, we rag on them all the time in this show, but I don't mind some Ubisoft games. Like I can't do Far Cry anymore because I got sick of it about 4 games ago, but I jump into Assassin's Creed every few releases and check it out. And I grabbed that Immortals Phoenix Rising game, and it was decent. It's just another Assassin's Creed game, but it's decent enough. But I think the main thing that kills these Ubisoft games is just that they release like 4 a year and they're too similar. So I'd actually quite like a world where maybe, you just got one of those games in a year, and then the next year one of the other series just came up and gave it a go. I think it would breed more innovation. It would give them an opportunity to actually bloody change the games a bit. And that'd be nice. But of course, that's not what this is about. This is a financial call about money. They're just making free to play games so they can sell microtransactions. So I'm not gonna go too far into giving them some kind of credit for trying to make their AAA games more unique and different, because that ain't what this is. This is just they want to sell you a hat for 20 quid. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be the exact same game released every year. It's just going to have slightly longer between them. So I guess that's nice. I mean, I did notice that Skull and Bones game, which has been in development hell for the best part of 7 years now or something, has been delayed again to like 2023 or something. And that's just hilarious. I have no idea what this game is going to be at this point.
I just can't believe they're still making that game, because like obviously they kind of showed it first around the time that Assassin's Creed was getting very piratey, right? And they were like, oh, look at all this pirate battles, all this fun. And then they were like, oh, you're going to be able to do like PvP pirate ship fights. And, someone apparently in the world was interested in that. I don't know them, but someone must have been. But I feel like now you get to 2022, like I can't think of something that would have less excitement behind it than a bloody pirate ship versus battle game. Like who wants that? I don't know who would need that. It's completely baffling to me. I don't know why it hasn't just been cancelled. It's just so weird that it's even still there.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest, Rare made this game with Sea of Thieves anyway. And if you was to say to me, okay, Rare sucks, so they can't make this game, but which company would you like to try to do it instead? The company on the very bottom of my list would be Ubisoft. So they retrospectively made Sea of Thieves look like an absolute classic. It's just absolutely no reason for this game to exist. I have no idea why they don't just cancel it, along with Beyond Good and Evil 2, which has never existed. And we can all just accept it and move on. It's just sort of a strange company. What an odd little company Ubisoft are. God damn.
Absolutely. That all makes sense to me. But let's move on to one of our more friendly companies, a company we actually like here, which is good old Sega. So
love Sega.
Sega also have been doing a bit of financial reporting this week, and we got a couple of notes out of theirs that sound pretty great, to be honest. The first one is that one of Sega's big plans in the next 5 years is to make what they're calling a super game, and I think a super game is what Microsoft would be calling a quadruple A game. But let's be honest, super game is the absolute perfect title for that kind of game. That's what we want. I want super games. So yeah, we're getting a Sega super game. No one knows what it's going to be yet, if it's going to be an existing IP, a new IP. But I'm on board. I'm well on board with Sega trying to make a super game. I just think whatever it is, it's going to be some kind of crazy 7 out of 10 train wreck, and I'm very much excited to play it.
I mean, I don't know why Sega keep doing themselves down. Every game they make is a super game. Come on, Sega. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Your gaming's good, boy. You
Yeah.
don't need to do yourselves down. I'm sure whatever your super game is, I hope it's like a Space Channel 5 remake. Because that would that would make me lose my mind.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world go, what is going on? But yeah, let's see what this super game is. Put it on.
They just lean really hard into Sega bass fishing. They just like put all the budget in the world behind it. Like you actually get a real fishing rod to play the game. It'd just be fantastic. But anyway, yeah. Speaking of stuff like Space Channel 5 and old Sega bass fishing, so the other thing that was mentioned in this is that Sega are looking to try and bring back more of their dormant franchises. They're aware that they're kind of leaving a lot of money on the table there with a lot of franchises that could do well. And yeah, apparently there's no real announcements right now, but apparently they're actively pursuing, which routes are the best routes to take for those games, whether it's remasters, remakes, or just full-on reboots. So, I mean, that's great news because Sega have a back catalog of some really cool stuff in there. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing some of these dormant franchises. I think one of the dormant franchises I'd like to see the most would be Sonic the Hedgehog. Actually, that'd be quite nice. Quite nice to get a new Sonic game at some point. But obviously, as well as that, you got like Jet Set. I'd love a new Jet Set Radio. That'd be super cool. And yeah, I mean, obviously, you've already said Space Channel 5, but is there anything else that particularly sticks out to you that you'd like to see come back here?
I'd love to see Sega get back into driving games because they make the best. Give me a new Sega Rally. Give me a Crazy Taxi. I don't know if they still have the rights to like an Outrun, but give me a new Outrun game. They used to be synonymous with Sega consoles. I mean, all those franchises were absolutely fantastic. I don't think there's a single company other than Nintendo who have a catalog of IPs and franchises as good as Sega. Yeah. They've got so many great franchises. They just don't make games for them. And I don't quite understand it. It's mind-bogglingly silly. But yeah, by all means, I fully support Sega bringing back all these games. Do it with the Dreamcast too. I've said it once and I'll say it again. I'll bang that drum until I'm dead in the head because it's about time that it happened. But yeah, I'm all looking forward to having Sega come back to the table and actually make some games. Sonic Adventure 3 as well, please, because of course.
Come on, obviously Sonic Adventure 3 on the new Sega Dreamcast. That's what we're all about. Make that the super game. To be honest, I'd be well on board for that being the super game. Anyway, then moving on from Sega, next up is EA. And EA have announced the date for EA Player, which is their E3 conference of sorts. They kind of got away from E3 a while ago because they didn't want to pay the prices to actually be there. So they just parked literally outside it and made their own event like a bunch of dicks, which you got to respect. So yeah, EA Player's back, but it is not a part of E3 in any capacity. It's going to actually be in July 22nd. So yeah, completely shunning E3, completely getting away from that whole conversation. I mean, I got to say, Josh, I have no interest in anything that could be at this. So the main thing that I find interesting is that they've chose to move away from the E3 time slot. I wonder if, maybe they're just not ready to show the things they want to show.
I just don't think they've got anything to show, do they? I mean, most of the big franchises, either just had a game released. I mean, Mass Effect's had its Legendary Edition that's just come out.
Yeah.
Knockout City's finally come out, the next titan of video gaming as we can see it. Other than the sports games, I don't really see what EA is going to show at this showcase. Maybe that Dragon Age game, but nobody really likes Dragon Age. Even those people who say that they do, that they don't really. Nobody likes Dragon Age. It's not like Crysis is coming back. It's not like we're going to see a new Dead Space game. So, I mean, what are they going to show? It's just going to be some more sports titles. So, yeah, who cares? I don't even know why they're doing a show to begin with.
I could see it a stretch, maybe a teaser for a Jedi Fallen Order sequel, maybe. But that thing will be years away yet. So, it's, I don't know. If they really want to show something just to get someone excited, then they could do it. But other than that, yeah, you're kind of right, man. There's not a lot on the horizon. Some of them most interesting series, like your Dead Spaces, they're just dormant anyway. Give that to Sega. They're bringing back series. That's what I want. give that a go. But yeah, I don't know. It's a strange one. It's weird to see them move away because EA always loved taking that first spot of the weekend, right? That was their whole thing. They'd always like, oh, E3 starts on Saturday. Well, we're here Friday night with our big stupid building outside. Like it's what they did, but clearly they're not particularly confident here. I don't know. We'll probably just see a bunch of sports updates, frankly. So yeah, that's that.
Can't say what else it'd be. I mean, I'd love to see Titanfall 3. That would be the
Yeah.
dream EA announcement, but that's not going to happen because Respawn makes Apex Legends. And yeah, I just don't see it. It's not going to happen.
No, I mean, they've even started to, like, the most recent series or season on Apex Legends is basically starting to kind of shoehorn a bunch of Titanfall lore in there. And it sounds like they're just going to use that as their Titanfall sort of storytelling device, which is, kind of sucks, man. Titanfall was awesome, but I don't think it's coming back. But yeah, so that's EA. Right, the next stop, we're off to Koei Tecmo, not a place we often go. But there was a interview this week with the president of Koei Tecmo, and he was basically getting asked about, obviously they've had a ton of success recently, branching out and making Warriors games for different licenses. There's obviously a Fire Emblem one, a Zelda one. They're still making their own series like Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors and stuff. They even made a Dragon Quest one quite a while ago now, but they did that too. And he was asked what franchises they'd like to go to that they haven't had a chance to yet. And one of his answers was Star Wars, which I'm not even planning on talking about because, sure, that'd be good. It makes sense. The one I want to talk about is Super Mario, Josh. He said he'd love to make a Super Mario Dynasty Warriors game. And yeah, I mean, it's like we said in our intro at the top of the show, I'm pretty sure this is an idea that's so stupid, it's actually kind of brilliant. Like, I don't know, on the surface, you think you can't make a Mario game about punching and stabbing things in the face. But then you just get that visual in your head of like literally 200 Goombas just hobbling towards you, and you got to just punch them all out the way, and you're killing like 20 at a time with each hit. Like, I don't know, there's magic to be found there for sure.
I mean, I can completely get behind the idea of just like an army of dry bones coming towards them, and you just beating them with their own bones. Like, don't get me wrong, there's things I could get on board with this game, but my God, what a stupid idea. Like, it's just not possible. I mean, I know nobody ever thought Mario would have a gun, and he did in that Ubisoft game with the rabbits, so
yeah,
nothing is off the table, apparently, but I just don't see him bludgeoning 200, 300 Goombas surrounding him, along with that image just being horrifying. Just the thought of that is horrifying to me. Scary than anything in a Warriors game. So, yeah. I love his commitment to Nintendo and trying to get more of their franchises, but maybe not Mario. Maybe not that dude. Maybe we could go with somebody else.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to pull this one off, I have to say, and I think you would have some trouble when you try and design this game, because these Warriors games kind of, they live and die by the diversity of their cast of characters and the different attacks they do. Can you really do a lot with Mario and Luigi and Waluigi? Like, is there really that many different attacks? Like, what you give Wario a bike, I guess he'll drive around. But yeah, it's maybe not the best fit, but I'll tell you what, if it gets made, man, I will be absolutely buying it day one because I'd need to see it.
Oh, we'd all have to see that game. That is just bonkers. I honestly can't believe he even suggested it. I imagine the second he said it, he just, oh my God, did I actually say that out loud? What am I doing?
And now if Nintendo get in touch with him, he'll actually have to make it. And he'll be like, oh God, why did I say it? It can't be done. No. He's just having nightmares about Mario just punching Hammer Brothers in the face repeatedly. He's like, it's too much, man. Right then, anyway, let's move on to Sony. We got Sony up next, and there's been a report this week. So we covered recently that there was that great report from Bloomberg about how Sony were kind of shutting up shop on a lot of really cool studios that are under their umbrella. They kind of closed Japan studio and just merged any existing any employees that stayed into Team Asobi or make Astrobot. They kind of shut down the plan for a smaller studio to make a Last of Us remake because they wanted to get Naughty Dog to do it, which is a insane waste of resources. And so this report this week feels to me like a bit of a response from Sony to the kind of fears that they're closing down new IPs, basically, that they're not interested. So they've came out this week and said that they have more than 25 PS5 games in development internally right now, and that almost half of them are new IPs. So I guess we can take that as saying, maybe 11 or 12 of them are new IPs, which, that's cool. That's nice to hear. Obviously, it's difficult to really speculate on what those new IPs would be right now because we don't have anything on them. But I think the thing I found quite interesting is that leaves a pretty large total of games in existing IPs that they're working on. And we don't know about too many of those. Let's say if that means there's 13 of them, we know about Horizon, God of War, Gran Turismo, Ratchet and Clank obviously isn't out yet, so you count that. And then we kind of unofficially know that somebody is making a Last of Us 1 remake for no apparent reason. So that's like 5 games. And then, yeah, I don't know. There's apparently about another 7 or 8, I guess, from existing IPs that they're working on. And yeah, I don't know, man. Is there anything in particular you'd like to see from those? Is there any dormant franchises from Sony that you're hoping somebody is whittling away at behind the scenes?
I don't know so much about Dornman. I mean, I imagine there'll be a new Uncharted game, and I'd obviously play it because I love the franchise. I did a lot of rumblings out of Insomniac recently that they want to do something with their Sunset Overdrive IP.
Yeah.
That they don't want to see that just disappear entirely. So in a twist, it looks like Sony may end up getting the best game on Xbox One pretty much on their next franchise with Sunset Overdrive 2. I'd be intrigued to see that actually, because I think there's a lot of potential in Overdrive. If it was a good game, I actually think it could have been tightened up a bit, so I'd be very interested in a sequel. So yeah, if you want to stick Insomniac on Sunset Overdrive, as long as doing apparently 100 other games.
Yeah.
They're just some giant studio of monsters right now who are just pumping out Spider-Man, Ratchet, and now I'm just going to force them to do Overdrive.
I mean,
at the same time.
I don't even understand like the work rate from that studio, because I don't think they're the biggest studio in the world. And yet, as you said, yeah, Spider-Man Miles Morales, which came with a remaster of the first Spider-Man that was good. They really sharpened that game up. A few months later, Ratchet and Clank, potentially Sunset Overdrive 2, Spider-Man 2, you'd think has to be in the works as well. Like that studio is insane. I don't know how they're putting all this stuff out, but they are absolutely they're carrying, frankly, the PS5 right now. They are the absolute MVP of this console. Sony got an absolute steal picking them up for, it was something tiny, like 200 million or something, which, it's insane that they got them for that money. But yeah, I'd love to see a Sunset Overdrive 2. I think in many ways, the first game is, the only thing that holds it back is that it was an early title for the Xbox One. And, early titles on consoles tend to be a bit aged by the time if you come back to them a few years later, there's a lot of little bits you think could be tweaked and improved. So I'd be well on board for a sequel. I'd even quite like, to be honest, if they handed the first game off to what's the studio called? The one Sony has, that great Porthouse, the one that did the Demon Souls remake. Blue Point, is it? Blue Point?
Yeah, Blue Point.
Yeah, you could even give Sunset Overdrive 1 to Blue Point and get them to, introduce that series to the Sony and PlayStation audience first ahead of a sequel. I think that'd be really cool too. So yeah, a lot of options there. In terms of kind of old franchises, if we say there's a couple more games from existing IPs left there, I don't know. I'd like some weird stuff. Maybe let's. I think maybe the time's right now for Parappa the Rapper to come back. Let's do some more kicking and punching in Parappa the Rapper. That'd be nice. I'm always on board for more Siphon Filter, even though I know it would literally just be a generic spy game, because that's all it ever was. I just have nostalgia for it anyway. That'd be nice. Just generic ass spy adventure. That'd be good fun. But I don't know. Let's see. Maybe there'll be a couple of cool surprises hidden amongst there.
Yeah, I guess it depends what you find as Sony IP, because some of the biggest games for Sony aren't actually theirs. Like, you associate Metal Gear with PlayStation, despite the fact that it isn't their IP. So you would do it. All those sort of games. There's a lot of games which could be coming to this console, which could be a lot of fun to play. So it's assuaged my fears somewhat that Sony had just given up on the concept of new games. To hear that there could be 11 or 12 in the makes of original IP, that's really exciting to hear, because that's kind of what Microsoft's doing. So I want to see both platforms doing that. Microsoft launching a bunch of new IP. So Sony, that's good. That's what I want this console generation to be. I don't care who sodding wins that. I just want the consoles I paid for to actually have stuff to play on it. So yeah, all for that. Sounds good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. That's the thing, right? We've obviously had these consoles a while now. It seems like people might actually be able to buy them at some point in 2022. So by then, it would be nice if there was a few good games to play on them, maybe. So we will see. But let's see one more story then. Speaking of just fantastic releases, fantastic games you can get your hands on. People have been clamoring for a while now for a few things on the Nintendo Switch. A few things that are missing from the console that they'd like to see. Even just stuff like, your Netflixes, like basic applications that you find on a lot of stuff. It's not on the Switch, and that's quite weird. But one of those has finally been solved this week, Josh, because for just £10 on the eShop, you can buy the calculator So, so if you've ever needed a calculator, and logically the Switch would be the first place you go for that, you ain't gonna pick up your phone. It's a waste of time. Stupid free phone calculator. You want your Switch. You want to be able to control that calculator with Joy-Cons or with touch input. So many choices, so many options. For £10, it's now yours. So yeah, just a fantastic release there. I'm sure we'll be covering calculator on one of our shows at some point.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. I love how this has been picked up by the internet. It's almost like, I mean, we all know the Nintendo eShop is a dumpster fire of a storefront. It's just every piece of trash humanly possible has found its way onto it. And yet this is the thing which has broken the camel's back for some people. Yeah. This is the step too far. Not the shovelware, not the broken video games, not the endless ports. It's the calculator. That was too much. People can't handle. I just love the audacity of charging £10, and the thing is, I know why they've done it as well, because as you said, the eShop is a mess, and because there's no searchability in the eShop, the only way any indie developers sell their games is to bring them out at quite a high price and then put them on like a 98% off sale, which gets them to the top of the top selling list. So that's what this is. I honestly, for some stupid reason, in about a month's time, you're going to see the calculator for like 17 pence. And it'll be in the top of the top sellers list because people are buying it as a stupid joke. That's the long game. And I think they're going to actually succeed in it. So well done, developers of Calculator. You've rigged the game. Well, anyway, on the note of overly high-priced Nintendo Switch calculators, that is the end of the news this week and the end of the show. So if you want to catch us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Beat the Sheet. We will be almost certainly telling you the latest Leaving Soon games on there. If not the day you're listening, then very soon after. They should be out very soon. If you want to drop us an email, you can find us at beatthesheetpodcast@gmail.com. Always enjoy getting responses from our listeners, so definitely give us a message there if you've got anything you'd like to say. And until next time, I'm Andy Wood, and I'm clawing my way up on the sheet. I'm now at 73%, so making progress, nearly at the 3/4 mark. And my name is Josh Stevenson, and I've managed to claw my way up one more percentage point to 64% of the sheet. We're making some good progress at the moment. I'm very proud of myself. So yeah, only another 35% to go, and the nightmare is over. So yeah, that's great.
Basically all but done. There we go. Good job. Right then, guys, thanks a lot for listening this week, and we'll catch you next week.
Goodbye.